Good afternoon. This is the Crayfish Dissection. So we've got a nice big male here and a nice big female here, and I'm joined outside today with two special helpers whose names are
Jack and Charlie.
Jack and Charlie. So take a look at these. So these crawdads, or crayfish, they've all got a nice hard exoskeleton. You guys want to come see their claws?
I already saw it.
They already saw them. So they can move them back and forth like this. These are called chelipeds. There's usually one that's larger than the other. These look about the same. But in here, this one's a little bit larger. So crawdads can actually be handed. So some of them are left-handed, some of them are right-handed. And depending on which side they favor, that claw will grow larger and larger and larger. So we'll learn about the external morphology first, and then we'll get inside the internal morphology. These are arthropods, so they all have a nice hard exoskeleton secreted by their epidermis, and it's made from a special protein called chitin, and they have to periodically shed their exoskeletons as they grow. All right, these crustaceans are in class Malacostraca, order Decapoda. These crustaceans have 10 walking legs, so they're decapods, and this first pair are their chelipeds, and then you have 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what's remarkable about these are all their different appendages. And their appendages can be specialized for a lot of different functions. And so we need to learn all the functions and the names for all these diverse appendages. We'll start with the external morphology up here. So up here we have a rostrum. This is like almost a nose, snout-like thing. And on the tip of the rostrum we have antennules. And these antennules aid in sensing chemicals in the water, but they're also important for equilibrium and balance. And you can see here that there's two little branches of the antennules. Crustaceans are biramous, which means all their appendages have two sections. So we can see that most clearly on the antennules, which have these two nice little branches. Antennules for equilibrium and balance. The antennas are really more for sensing, tasting water, sensing vibrations and change in water current and direction. And then we have eyes, compound eyes for detecting light, a little wobbly, some eye stalks, so they can actually rotate them around a little bit, as you can see here. Nice. And then we have a cervical groove right here. This cervical groove separates the head from the thorax, and then here we have a medial line that separates the right and left sides. And let me crack this open real fast so we can see what's on the inside of this. This section right here is called the carapace, and it protects the gills. So inside here, if we look real quick, just take a little peek inside. What do we find? This is the branchial chamber, and this houses the gills. So all these fine feathery things are the gills, and the carapace protects them. Keeps them in their own little chamber called the branchial chamber. You can see this kind of shiny membrane here that separates the branchial chamber from the actual abdominal cavity of the crayfish. The gills usually connect, you can see here, to the base of the legs. So at the base of every leg, they also have a gill connected there. So the gills, as you know, are for gas exchange. If we look in here, we have all these little mouth parts, all kinds of different mouth parts fused together, and these mouth parts are for mostly processing food, handling food, tasting food, and bringing in water currents to their gills. Right here we can see their mandibles, these really obvious hard structures right here. These are their teeth. These are the primary cruncher smashers of their mouth parts. The rest are just kind of food handlers and tasters and stuff like that. And for all of these things, you should be able to identify things if I point them out in the crawdad as a whole, and then in a minute we're going to extract them all, line them up, and then we'll be able to identify them apart from the crawdad as well. Going down, we have the first walking leg, or cheliped, that is used for defense or for grabbing prey. And then we have the second walking leg, third walking leg, fourth walking leg, and, you guessed it, the fifth walking leg. Now, one interesting thing about the walking legs is that if you look at the second and third walking legs, you can see a nice little claw on their walking legs, which is pretty cool. The second and third walking legs have that. The fourth and the fifth do not. This poor little guy has been a little chopped up, but let's take a look here. So this is the fifth walking leg, and we see just a single claw. So I won't ask you to differentiate the second from the third, but you should be able to differentiate the second and third from the fourth and fifth. Going down, we have swimmerets on the abdomen. So actually, again, head, thorax, abdomen, or cephalothorax and abdomen. The abdomen here, if you imagine this guy crawling along in the mud looking for some food, he gets startled, oh no, and then he will flex his abdomen like this, and he jets away this way. So this is a highly flexible muscular tail, and we have these nice kind of rudders here, oars. This is called the uropods, and this collectively is called the telson. So the telson is this middle section. These little flappy things on the ends are specialized appendages called uropods. So the telson and uropods together form a nice backwards propulsive movement that forces the crawdad away. So if you ever want to catch crawdads, all you have to do is put your hand behind them and poke them, and they'll just whoop right into your hand. Easy peasy. And then you get to eat them. Some people eat these little critters. Delicious. We can notice also back here at the end, we have the opening to the digestive system, the anus right here. And let's talk about the swimmerets a little bit. So the swimmerets help them swim a little bit, but they also aerate the eggs. So on the female, this one's a female, the females will carry a mass of eggs right in here, and the swimmerets will hold onto those and aerate them with water. So they'll bring in more nutrients and oxygen and carry carbon dioxide away. Now, how do you tell male from female? This one's a female, this one's a male, and it's actually really easy to tell the difference. The size is often pretty similar. They have all the same attributes. They got chelipeds and antennas, antennules, mouthparts, walking legs, swimmerets, uropods, telsons, etc. But the difference is going to be in the very first pair of swimmerets. For the females, like I said, the very first pair is going to help brood the eggs, and the very first pair are these little guys right here. So this is the very first pair of swimmerets on the female, and they're very, very small, and if you look just anterior to those, you will see a structure right here. This is the seminal receptacle. So sperm is received and stored here, and then eggs are carried with these little brooding swimmerets here. So let's contrast these first pair of swimmerets with the males. And the male's first pair, this is the male's first pair of swimmerets. Significantly different, obviously different, very distinct, and they don't have a seminal receptacle for obvious reasons. Instead, they have openings to their genital openings are here and here. You can't really see them very well, but sperm will be released here and then transferred to the female seminal receptacle here. The first pair of swimmerets on the males is called copulatory swimmerets because they are used to transfer sperm to the females. So that's why they're longer and sturdier than the females. So look here, the more posterior swimmerets are almost identical, but the first pair, compare these small guys right here to these large copulatory swimmerets that rest kind of in between the walking legs. These are males. So make sure you know male from female. You can identify copulatory swimmerets, first pair of swimmerets, seminal receptacle. So for swimmerets, I could, maybe have this pair of swimmerets right here. And again, you can see the biramus aspect, 2 branches. And I could maybe have this swimmeret on the practical, and you would know that this is, anything you say here would be fine. You could call it second or third or fourth swimmeret. That's all fine. They're all the same. But this is the first swimmeret of a female. And similarly for a male, this would be the first swimmeret for a male. So these are the 3 different kinds of swimmerets I expect you to be able to differentiate: copulatory swimmeret, brooding swimmeret, and just regular old swimmeret. So what all these things are, do a quick quiz. What is this? Rostrum. What is this? Cheliped. What are these? Antennules. What's this? Antenna. This? Telson. This? Uropod. This? Swimmeret. This? Carapace. Copulatory swimmeret. Female's first pair swimmeret. Either the second or third walking leg. Either the fourth or fifth walking leg. You can tell because of the single versus the double claws. We have mouth parts here. We'll get to that in a minute, more in detail. Here we have the mandibles. Functions: grabbing, smashing, fighting, equilibrium, taste, transferring sperm, holding eggs, swimming, backwards propulsion, protecting the gills. Oh, and remember in here, peekaboo. Yep, we got little gills in there. Gills are for gas exchange, and the purpose of the carapace is to protect the gills. This thing is called the branchial chamber. Okay, so now what we're going to do is take all the appendages off one at a time, and then we'll make a little line so we can see them. If you can see that. Yeah. All right, so first we have the uropods for backwards propulsion, and then we have the swimmerets, and you can use forceps. That's probably better than your fingers, but I left my forceps inside, and that's like 10 feet away. Got to open and close like a single door, so it's just too far away. You understand. And we have swimmerets, swimmeret, and we know this is female because we have a seminal receptacle, and we already have the other swimmeret here, first pair. So how many swimmerets do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to pull off the 5th walking leg. And what do you notice here? Gills are connected to the walking legs. We already know that, though. We found them in the branchial chambers. Boom. Then the second. And try to grab it near the base, and we don't want to pull out all of the internal organs. Removing the gills is fine, but we want to leave everything else mostly intact. So I'm going to take off the cheliped here. So now, kind of the reason I was doing this was so that we could get to these mouth parts. I'm actually going to take this off too, just for some room. When we get to the mouth parts, we have lots of different kinds of mouth parts. and we're going to have 3 maxillipeds, and then 2 maxilla, and then the mandible. So the mandible here, and everything's kind of smashed together, so it can be a little difficult to find them. So what we're going to do is we're going to locate the first one here, trace it down to its origin, and just slowly take that away. And we'll notice that this is therefore the 3rd maxilliped. Extracted all the maxillipeds and the maxillae and the mandibles from the mouth parts, just one layer at a time. The 3 maxillipeds are here, and each maxilliped has 3 components to it: a protopod, an endopod, and an exopod. The protopod connects the appendage to the body and is jointed. The endopod is the medial section, and it just is a fine filamentous branch. And then the exopod is what is distinct about the maxilliped. So the 3rd maxilliped here has this long, bristly exopod that's used for bringing food in and kind of filtering food. Here is the 2nd maxilliped. We still have gills, so gills, endopod, endopod. We see the similarity between those sections. The difference here between the 2nd and the 3rd is found on the exopod. The 2nd maxilliped has this kind of blunt-ended exopod, very different than this one. And then the 1st maxilliped almost doesn't even have an exopod at all. It has the filamentous part, and it has the gill, which didn't make it. And then the exopod is a little thing right there, so you can't really see it. So 1st, 2nd, 3rd, these are maxillipeds. Look for the exopod to differentiate them. The maxillae are here, and they also help in processing food to the mouth. The 1st and 2nd maxilla don't really look very different, so I won't ask you to distinguish those, but you should distinguish a maxilla from a maxilliped. And in the mandible here, we have 2 branches, here and then here. This section right here is really hard. This is the kind of the jaws, the really big smashing thing of the crawdad's mouth part. And we can also see that that's connected to a pretty giant muscle, comparatively speaking. This is a mandibular muscle, and this pretty massive muscle smashes food in the crustacean. So these are the mouth parts, these are the appendages. Be able to locate them in your organism and when they're all by themselves alone. Look inside our critters, and at this point we're going to we've removed the carapace. I'm going to remove the other side. Well, I'm going to leave that carapace. Well, let's see what happens. Let's just try it. So here is the other side of the carapace. We want to leave these guys as much intact as possible so that we can see all the organs as they are. I'm just going to snip these off instead of pulling them so that they don't mess up the gills. And then I'm going to cut down the dorsum of the abdomen. Split that open. Trying to get the scissors right beneath the exoskeleton and not too deep, otherwise you'll break up the tissue, which I did there, unfortunately. So I mainly got muscle tissue though, so it's all good. So I'm just going to peel this like I would before a crawfish boil, or after one, depending on how you like to eat them. And here we see really good muscle tissue. Running the length of here, we have the intestine. That's going to eventually expel waste through the anus. And then here we have a nice muscle, a retractor muscle. When this contracts, this whole thing will bend in. So this is all muscle tissue. This is what you would eat. It'd be pretty good eating. So I'm going to take this apart for now. We see some muscles, some extensor and retractor muscles in the back there. And then we see gonads here. So these right here are the gonads. This is a female. So these are ovaries. And just to remind you, this is seminal receptacle, little tiny brooding swimmerets. That's how I know it's a female. That's how I know these are ovaries. This pink thing here, this is the heart. The latex has been infused in the heart, and so the heart is right there. It has an open circulatory system. This little membrane separates the branchial chamber from the rest of the system. And if we peel that back, looks like the latex kind of overwhelmed the heart a little bit, but there on the heart there are usually holes there called ostia. The blood flows into the ostia, and then the heart pumps it north and south systemically. All right, let's get inside the head area here and see what's going on up here. Just gonna peel it like a little Easter egg. Nice. Good work. Thank you. All right, here's the important thing here. This nice black ridge right here is kind of how you can orient yourself. That's an important structure for figuring out what things are. That is called the pyloric ridge, and this is kind of part of the stomach. And this is kind of strange, right? So you look laterally, the stomach is right here, right behind the head is going to be the stomach. So we kind of expect the stomach to be down here. Not so. The stomach is up here. So locate this ridge, and then gonna get through this little membrane here, peritoneum, and we will see muscle right here. Look at this nice muscle tissue there. That is the mandibular muscle, and we saw the other side of that over here with the mandibles. Yeah, bud.
Yes.
So we have mandibular muscles here and here. And then let's scrape this back and we'll see two other muscles. These are the anterior gastric muscles. The muscles have this very distinct striated tissue, and these are going to help with moving the stomach back and forth. Let's just move them out of the way so we can see the stomach. This whole black thing right here is a stomach. And before I extract the stomach, I want to highlight this tissue that's all over the place right here, this kind of granular, tannish yellow tissue. This is the digestive gland. This is the largest organ in the crayfish, and it's everywhere. All of this yellow tissue is digestive gland that's going to secrete digestive enzymes. And it almost looks very similar to the ovaries or the testes if it was a male. But so if it's kind of yellowish granular tissue on its anterior, it's digestive gland. If it's yellowish tissue and it's posterior, it's going to be the gonads. So digestive gland, let's go ahead and remove some of that so we can see the stomach. The stomach has two components, a cardiac stomach and a pyloric stomach. The cardiac stomach is anterior to this pyloric ridge here. So cardiac stomach here and pyloric stomach. I'm just going to extract the whole thing here. And it looks like it's been eating some stuff. I want to rummage around here because I want to find the gastric teeth. So these things right here, these are the gastric teeth. They're in the stomach, and they're used to further mechanically break down the food. So they have teeth inside their stomachs. Pretty remarkable. And you can see they're calcified. You can kind of hear that. These are heavily calcified gastric teeth. Nice. All right, and then we know the heart. And let's go ahead and take the heart out now. See this, all this latex kind of exploded. Underneath the heart. And this is a good example of how the tissue of the digestive gland looks very similar to the tissue of the reproductive organs. But you can see the reproductive organs are posterior, digestive gland is anterior. we move these aside, we can see the intestines and then the abdominal muscles. And that is really it. So there's not a lot going on inside. We get digestive gland that secretes digestive enzymes. We have gonads, which are going to produce and store sperm or eggs. We have heart, which pumps the blood. We have retractor muscles and extensor muscles that retract and extend. We have a gastric teeth that mash up the food in the stomach. We have a stomach that mechanically and chemically breaks down the food. And that's pretty it. Right? Pretty simple. All right, so make sure you know functions and identity of all these things. I'm gonna do the male and then take pictures so you can see what everything is.